This past weekend, I was sick. Just unbearably ill. To the point that it took over every aspect of my day-to-day. Couldn't eat because I was too terrified of what would happen if my stomach was full. Couldn't use the restroom because that was a gamble. Even taking a shower brought shivers and filled me with terror. Every little part of my day, I had to think about how sick I was. Including Pokemon. I had to miss one of my weekly uploads. Because I was so sick. We do 3 videos a week, and so obviously I didn't have a ton of time to work on one of those videos, but I did have a lot of time to think. What if Pokemon evolved by being sick? I think one of the biggest things that we have between Pokemon and the real world is the idea of these status conditions. True, I didn't have paralysis or burns or frozen, but I definitely felt sleep. I was unconscious for most of the weekend. So what if these status conditions were what allowed a Pokemon based on sickness to evolve? That's what we're going to be looking at today. So without much further ado, let's go ahead and jump into that video. Greetings and bienvenue. I'm the Thesterninator, but my friends call me Stern. Welcome to the channel. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, hit that bell, do all of that stuff YouTube has you do, and we're going to hop right into today's video. Starting off, I wanted to focus on the concept of evolution, how the whole idea revolves around fixing problems in previous generations. We evolved hands so that we could easier manipulate tools and objects as those became important to the structure of what it means to be a human. We began to walk upright so that we could reach higher branches, be able to grab food that's no longer on the ground. And if there's any Pokemon that really encapsulates the concept of evolution, it's of course Eevee. So I decided, what if eeveelutions, at least these eeveelutions, were problems solved that came from different status conditions? I started off with this version. It's a rock type eeveelution, one that has better acquainted itself with the idea of being burned. What can stand up against being burned better than other things? Well, a rock type. A lot of the designs that I go for today are stuff that has a resistance to a certain Pokemon type, but being that fire is a burning thing, I figure there's not really anything that combats burning. So I decided to go with rock. It stands up to it the best, and I think it works, and is an excuse to make an eeveelution. I'm gonna be honest, most of this video was an excuse to make eeveelutions, and I wouldn't have it in either way. I wouldn't go back, I would make 0 changes. I love doing this. It was a real good excuse to do that because eeveelutions are the bread and butter of a lot of Pokemon fandom. People love them. Why? Because there's so many options, so many opportunities. It was the first time in Pokemon that we got this varied evolution style. And from then, it expanded, giving us Umbreon and Espeon in following generations, followed after that by Leafeon and Glaceon, and then by Sylveon. We're still waiting to get that new eeveelution, hopefully in the next game. But until then, we're gonna have to suffice with what we got. I also played with different styles. As I looked at the different eeveelutions across the various outings that they appeared in, I realized there's a couple different styles there. This one really focuses on the Vaporeon, Jolteon, Flareon type of look. It's small, it's cute, it has those big black eyes, and very much just throws the element that it's trying to encapsulate on top of it. For Jolteon, what if we made its hair spiky like electricity? For Flareon, what if we made it look like it was on fire? For Vaporeon, what if it was fish? Fish. So for this one, I decided to just go that same route. Threw rocks right on top of Eevee. Normally, throwing a rock at an Eevee would probably make it a ghost type. But for this game and this play on having it adapt to the burn status, I thought using rock would be a really, really good move, and I'm happy with it. I just kind of played with the colors a little bit, played with texture. The rock typing really let me do that, and I'm glad that it did because I really like the way that these rocks came out. I think that they came out in a way that makes them feel very solid, very singular in concept, but still a little bit more exciting and gives some variation and breakup to the eye and color palette. So this is Silicion, a play on silicone, a mined mineral. I'm from California where we have Silicon Valley, so Silicion. For the shiny, I want just a variation allowing those type of rocky, orangey, brownish colors to become more stone-like. It is the pet rock Pokemon, which I think is absolutely adorable. Almost immediately following our rock type evolution, things became a lot more complicated. I tried looking at what could resist poison and came upon steel type. Problem is, steel also resists poison and poison also resists steel. So I knew that I had to make a poison type, but I couldn't really figure out why. It just felt right. It felt like it had to be there. And given that that's the case, I started drawing. Taking inspiration from things like mushrooms and poisonous gases, I went with something that felt very frilled, taking inspiration from Vaporeon for the necklace type of look that we have there, that frill that kind of comes out. And I really dig it. I think it's a fun idea and really emulates a little bit of that mushroom idea without being super blatant and obvious, so I'm happy with it. I wanted to fit more so akin to the Glaceon and Leafeon type of look for this, that type of generational difference, whereas they start to get a little bit more lean as they go further and further out. Look at Vaporeon, look at Jolteon, look at Flareon. They're little round boys, and we love them. They're a little bit more, rotund, and that's okay. They're blocky, they're staggering. But these ones, they start to get a little bit more lean, a little bit more cat-like. And while we don't necessarily know exactly what type of animal Eevee is supposed to be, apart from mammal, I decided that I wanted to take those aspects into account. And I feel like it worked in a lot of ways. I wanted to give it hair. That was a big part of this. If I was going to focus on Glaceon and Leafeon, hair had to be on there. That was, for some reason, the pattern that they had that I really like. I think it works. And it allowed me to kind of play up a little bit more of the emotion and the personality of this Pokemon. So that was fun. I also experimented with shadows. Being that I was working on different generations of Pokemon here, I got to play with how they do shadows and found that there are huge branching variations in how that is handled by the Pokemon Company, depending on which generation. Current generations use a little bit more crisp and clean shadows, while older generations used a mixture of the two, and the middle generations went full-on gradient on us. So it was interesting getting to experiment with that and research that. I get people who ask, hey, how do you render? A lot. I get it on Twitter, I get it on Discord, I get it in comments, and the answer is I render in a way where I use these more harsh lines to make that faux gradient, much more like the modern takes on Pokemon. But this one, I really had to go out of my comfort zone and start playing with those actual gradients in the design. And I found that I really enjoyed it. It may be something that sticks around in my future art, but I'll have to experiment. I'll have to practice and get a little bit better with understanding how that works. But I think it worked really well for Toxeon, the Outbreak Pokemon, a pure poison type. That shiny just makes it look sickly. Bringing in that green and that muted peach-orange color, I think it really sells the idea of this Pokemon being toxified by itself. And the original actual Pokemon that we have, apart from the shiny, looks great as well. This one was easy. It's been something people have been asking for a long time, and I fully understand why. After getting to play with the shapes and ideas, I realized that this should have been always, and that is a ghost type eeveelution, as a resistance to the normal type attacks that cause sleep. So I got a lot of fun with this. I decided to go with an energy that played up that status condition a lot more. The idea of it being built, being evolved to combat the sleep status condition specifically. So in here, this eeveelution is always asleep, always dreaming, but it has one third eye always open. So while it is fully asleep, it's always fully awake at the same time. I'm so curious what the ability for this Pokemon as well as the others would be. Let me know down in the comments what you think. Would they get their own special type of ability, or would they take on one that already exists? Let me know. You guys are so great at that, and I always ask in videos because I usually don't get any bad answers. So yeah, I look forward to reading those. And I do get comments that say, hey, I know you're probably not gonna see this. I see most of them. I am hooked onto those comments from the first day, probably up into the second or third day. So I see them, and let me know. I definitely hear you, and I love being a part of that conversation. But if you want to be a little bit more into the conversation of what goes on with Pokemon and with kind of the challenges that we do, like right now we're doing an advent calendar challenge, join the Discord. It's linked down below in the description, and we do challenges, we just kind of hang out, we talk, we discuss upcoming stuff that I'm going to be doing with the channel. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I recently was in a voice chat and decided, what if I just kind of spill everything that I'm working on for 2015? Well, not everything, but spill some things that I'm working on for 2015, and that was a ton of fun. So if you're curious about any of that stuff, head on down to the Discord. It's in the description below, and if not, head on into the comments and let me know what abilities you think these Pokemon should have. For this design, I played around with some other inspirations from Pokemon. I like the necklace that Misdreavus and Mismagius have, so I put that on, really wanting to make this type of seance type of character. I wanted it to feel spectral, but in a way where it's almost Ouija-esque. It contacts the dead, it isn't the dead. And so in that way, still getting to be the ghost type without having to necessarily be a ghost itself. It's adapted to survive and be able to withstand sleep-based attacks. So it didn't have to die to do that, it just had to become in tune with the ghostly auras that allow those type of Pokemon to withstand falling asleep and other normal type attacks. Now, I will say, I know that there are attacks that do these status conditions outside of what those typings are, but this just kind of felt like the easiest way to explain this motif and this idea that I was going for. So yeah, I know, there's other attacks that do status conditions. You can absolutely get paralysis from other types of attacks outside of electric. You can absolutely fall asleep due to attacks outside of the normal typing, but this was kind of a easy excuse to get to do more eeveelutions. So that being said, we have Spectrion, the name coming from Spectre and Eon. It is the remembered Pokemon, a pure ghost type, and much like all other eeveelutions, its stat total comes out to 525. I wanted it to be just a little bit bigger than the other Pokemon in this line, just because I felt like it had some presence to it, especially with those spouting wisps. Moving in next, we have a Pokemon that has to be built to withstand paralysis, a mainly electric type status condition. So I went with a ground type Pokemon. Yeah. It's one of the first things that I remember learning with Pokemon and not ability types, but the elemental kind of restrictions against one another. I remember being a kid and hearing from someone probably on the playground somewhere, hey, did you know that electric type Pokemon attacks don't work on ground types? And I thought, no way, how does that work? That's weird. And it stuck with me. Since then, I've had to come up with little mnemonic devices to try and remember what attacks are strong against others, what resists others, and maybe you have too. Maybe you remember the 2 birds with 1 stone, to remember that bird types, or flying types I should say, are weak against rock type attacks. And for me, that was one here, was knowing that if I had to do something that withstood an electrical paralysis, there should be ground type. Around where I live, we have these dust devils. They're these spinning little cyclones of dirt and debris that just kind of whip up around farmland. And I wanted to focus in on that. I thought it'd be really easy to just make this a big Eevee with shovel ears or a shovel tail, or make it construction based. But I wanted to do something that was a little bit more natural, made it feel like it was this animal that you may stumble across, kind of just digging out in the woods somewhere, digging out in a field or a dirt mound, and yeah, I thought that'd be fun. So I came up with this whirlwind type of look to it. I thought its ears maybe form this dust devil, this little tornado of dirt and rock, and its tail maybe itself is one of those, I keep saying dust devil, but these little cyclones, and playing with that. Its body, obviously, since it roots around in the ground, searching for vegetables and other food that it can eat, it's going to be naturally covered in mud to the point that its body has become stained to kind of remember that muddy texture. Also allows it really good camouflage. For this one, I wanted to kind of focus not so much on a certain generation of eeveelutions, but more so on a personality type of eeveelutions. I looked at Jolteon specifically, which is the best eeveelution. Don't at me. The best eeveelution being Jolteon, it has this like punk rock aesthetic to it. It's electric type and it's an eeveelution, but it gets this personality of being very like attack oriented, very strikeout type. And I wanted to very much put a certain emotion and type of personality to this one too. So I played with that a little bit. I also kept playing with those gradient shadows. I found myself really enjoying how they look and allow this smoother transition for when I need it. So I kept playing with it. Like I said, it's something I'm gonna need to practice more because I really like the style, and while it is just a different Pokemon style, it's one that I really enjoy. I think art is always about adding to your arsenal of what you can do and what you know. Just looking at other different artists and what they do, finding how and why that works and adding it to your knowledge bank. I watch a lot of Subjectively, and I watch it because very often Jack will break down why he's making the decisions that he's making. That's good. That's kind of what allowed me to kind of look back and say, oh, here's how we do highlights within the shadows. Here's how we break up those shapes. So yeah, I think I was able to pull a lot of those into Dusteon. So this is Dusteon, the Dust Devil Pokemon, pure ground type. For the shiny, I had to make one of my eeveelutions just green. Espeon is our weird little alien cat thing, and I wanted to really fit that same energy, so I went with this dull green. Hey, sorry to interrupt, just wanted to let you know that I'm launching a second channel. You can subscribe to that now. There's nothing over there yet, but starting January, we're gonna be launching video essays, interviews, gameplay, as well as some card pack openings. So if you wanna see stuff like this, head on over there. I feel like it's a goodie. I hope it's worth it. Oh, should I turn it left? Should I turn it right? No idea. Oh, what do we got? What? 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 I hope I can see you over there, but for the moment, let's get right back into today's video. Another highly anticipated eeveelution is, of course, the Steel type eeveelution. I use this to combat that frozen status effect, which, like I said before when I worked on Poison, I guess this one can work for both being Poison and for Ice. Just kind of had to move some stuff around to figure out how it would all play out so that I can get one for each, but Steel really seemed like it worked, and it was one that I really wanted to do, so yeah, cry about it. Anyway, I went in and took some inspiration from Pokemon, specifically Future Paradox forms, but I didn't want it to feel super Future Paradox. I didn't want to just make a robot Eevee. It was really easy to fall into some of the pitfalls that I've seen other artists already do very successfully and try and just mimic those. So I decided I want to do something very different, drastically different. Maybe it was because I was kind of rewatching the My Adventures with Superman show that I thought, what if this thing was like this folding weapon? What if all these parts of metal armor kind of move and merge together to do different stuff? I came up with this idea of this tail kind of opening up into this like railgun or laser beam type of thing to do different types of attacks. So I kind of focused everything around that. These pieces of metal armor are kind of shifting around one another. And while it doesn't transform, that's for a future video. While it doesn't transform, I can picture kind of how these pieces move and change. I wanted them to feel like they were broken up and like they were on top of and a part of this animal. Rather than making this just a purely metal Eevee, I wanted to move some stuff. I wanted things to feel like they had motion, like they had personality to each individual aspect of this design. And using the Paradox Pokemon as an example really helped. I feel like it's difficult to get personality to something as stoic as a metal sheath over a robotic frame. But somehow they're able to do it. So I took inspiration from that and used that to teach me some lessons on how to better capture the look I was going for. A lot of it came down to playing and experimentation, especially on this one, but each of these eeveelutions kind of taught me something different when it comes to art. I learned that you need to be able to take in the aspects that other artists are using, but not necessarily copy them. Use them as educational motives, specifically using the parts that the actual Pokemon artists use, and finding what you can do to mimic those, as well as add your own flavor to them. I know a lot of people ask and talk about, oh, well, it's not in the Ken Sugimori art style. Well, it's not in the Pokemon art style. That's okay. Pokemon are fun, they're creative, and they don't have to fit any specific style. We're currently doing a challenge type thing on the Discord where people drop in their art for different advent calendar themed and Christmas holiday themed Pokemon, and a lot of my favorites don't necessarily fit the style, but they're really cool concepts. So focus on that when drawing, and I hope that you can see where I was going with Artifion. Focused on the idea of being artificial as well as Eon for it being an evolution. It is the artificial Pokemon, a pure steel type. And much like our future Paradox Pokemon, I just kind of changed the glow to these areas. I don't think they actually changed the glow. I think they just turned silver, but this was already silver, so yeah. So the final question, which eeveelution are you picking for your team? I remember in Pokemon Red, you only really got one choice. You could found the Thunderstone, the Firestone, or the Waterstone, and it felt like such a difficult decision that I would put it on par with picking your starter. It's a difficult conversation to have with you and your Eevee, but hopefully I think you can get through it. If you want to be a part of other fun conversations, check out our Discord down in the description below, and the Patreon where I do a free poll that drops every Monday for what our Wednesday video is going to be. Speaking of the Patreon, I want to give a shout out to all of our supporters across Ko-fi and Patreon, specifically some of our higher tier supporters, those being Soren Frost, Styx the Polar Bear, Jesse Badger, Teacup Cryptid, and Dan Bush. Couldn't do any of this stuff without you guys, so thank you so much. And with all that said, it sounds like you know where to find me. I'll catch you in the next one. Bye!